Borderlands games often bring back some fan favorite weapons when they release a new game. Sometimes these weapons will still rock, or even better yet, they're better than they were before, but sometimes the classic greats get destroyed. These are my top 5 best and worst returning Borderlands weapons in Borderlands 3. Let's start the list off with the worst first, finishing strong with the best returners later in the top 5 slots.
It's a top 10 list. Do we really need to say we're starting with 10?
Starting us off at number 10 is the Infinity Pistol. Now, this one is so disappointing for a lot of players, myself being chief among them. Sure, the Infinity was maybe a bit overhyped in Borderlands 2, but it was a solid pistol on multiple characters that could be used extremely well on certain Zero builds, and that's why I loved it so much. But in Borderlands 3, it is a tickle torture gun that feels like a Wish.com version of its former self. The Infinity Pistol drops from Doc Mercy in Borderlands 2 or from Anointed Alpha in Borderlands 3 if you really want to waste your time.
Now let's see number 9.
Coming in at number 9, the Bitch. This was actually the first legendary I ever got in my Borderlands career. I can still remember the first time I saw that drop, the euphoria of the orange beam. And on Borderlands 2, at least before Ultimate Mode was added, the Bitch was an absolute beast. High crit damage, laser accuracy, multiple elemental options. The worst part was the farm to get it though, since Bunker is notoriously stingy. However, in Borderlands 3, the Bitch is just straight up a bitch. What's worse is the dedicated source for it on Borderlands 3 is Tyreen, who's also a bitch, meaning that you're going to be at the end of normal mode when you're most likely going to get it. Now, if this thing was a dedicated drop from an enemy around level 10 or 15 or so, it could be considered at least pretty useful in normal mode. But if you get it from the final boss in normal mode, it's likely only going to be useful for the sell value.
Don't hate, it's number 8.
Coming in at number 8, the Ogre. Now, the Ogre was only one of 5 legendary weapons added in via DLC in Borderlands 2, and it was highly sought after for Axton and Krieg mains, although it was fun on pretty much every character too. However, in Borderlands 3, it just feels like the aforementioned Infinity Pistol, a shadow of its former self. Despite 2 separate damage buffs, the Ogre still remains largely useless for most people, although it's decent on normal mode if you happen to get it as a world drop. The Ogre drops from Warlord Slog in Borderlands 2, or once again from the Anointed Alpha in Borderlands 3. So basically what I'm telling you guys is Anointed Alpha is actually a beta.
Let's see number 7.
At number 7, the Conference Call. Well, you knew this one was coming if you've ever used this gun on Borderlands 3. The Conference Call was one of the most popular weapons of all time on Borderlands 2. Early on, when paired with the B-Shield, it was used to decimate raid bosses. But then they nerfed that interaction on Borderlands 2. But despite that change, the Conference Call remained a great all-around weapon. However, its Borderlands 3 counterpart has been trashed since day number 1. Despite 2 separate buff attempts, this gun still feels more like a nerf gun than a beast like it was on Borderlands 2. The Conference Call barely ever drops from the Warrior, so your best bet to farm it on Borderlands 2 is via the Handsome Sorcerer and the Tiny Tina DLC, and in Borderlands 3, it drops from Judge Hightower in Lectra City, so yeah, like don't bother.
Honorable mention.
Honorable mention for the worst part of the list, and before I name these, yes, I know some of them can be good in Borderlands 3 with the right build, but generally these are worse than their Borderlands 2 versions. The Baby Maker, the Gunnerang, Flacker, Sawbar, Sledge's Shotgun, and the Tunguska. And yeah, I know the Tunguska actually sucked in Borderlands 2, but it was a pearl there, so I just felt like mentioning it.
And now for number 6.
So at number 6, or what would be number 1 in the worst category, is the Hellfire. This is one of those guns that's been in the franchise since Borderlands 1, where it was absolutely amazing. Then in Borderlands 2, it was one of the best all-around fire elemental weapons in the game, at least until OP levels came around. Sadly, in the pre-sequel, it was only available from the grinders, so a lot of players never even saw it. But in Borderlands 3, somebody had the brilliant idea to completely change the manufacturer for this gun from Malawan to Dahl, resulting in one of the most disappointing returning weapons in franchise history. The Hellfire can only drop from Jabber Magua and Voracious Canopy, meaning you're already mostly through the campaign at that point, and even if you get a god roll on it, it just doesn't feel like itself. What's worse is it seems like it won't even drop on normal mode. I've heard reports that people have gotten it on normal mode. I have not ever had that happen unless I have Mayhem mode turned on. So you either need Mayhem enabled or you need to be on True Vault Hunter mode for this thing to drop, and either way this gun is just the absolute worst on those modes. On normal mode you could at least technically kill things with it, although you were probably better off using any generic fire elemental weapon. This is just the most absolutely mind-boggling decision in the history of bringing items back.
And here we are at number 5.
All right, now into the top 5 of this list, and these represent the best returning weapons in franchise history. Coming in at number 5, the Unkempt Harold. Now, the Unkempt Harold is one of the most well-known weapons in the franchise, available as early as level 8 to 10 on Borderlands 2, depending on how quick you get there. Getting one of these would easily last you 10 to 20 levels in that game, and add to that, it was available from Savage Lee, a named enemy who didn't really pose much of a threat to you, and it was a recipe for easy mode on Borderlands 2. But in Borderlands 3, the Unkempt Harold returned with DLC 3, The Bounty of Blood, and somehow it's just as good as, if not better than, its predecessor. And that's saying something, because anybody that's been around for a while knows just how much I love the Borderlands 2 version of this thing. But the Borderlands 3 version is amazing no matter which prefix or part you get, whereas the Borderlands 2 version is wildly dependent on getting the right grip, at least in later game modes. In normal mode, take any version and you're set. But in Borderlands 3, the Herald can come in multiple elements and doesn't even need a double penetrating prefix to slap. If you want to get one for yourself in Borderlands 3, then you head over to Caber Dowd in the Blood Sun Canyon in the Bounty of Blood DLC, where it has a 33% drop chance.
Okay, here we are at number 4!
At number 4 is the Becca. In Borderlands 2, the Becca was a hard to obtain pearlescent, and I know I'm saying returning legendaries in the title of this video, but it came back as a legendary in Borderlands 3, so that's why it's on the list. In Borderlands 3, the only way you can get this thing is by completing the Hammerlock hunt challenges, and then Hammerlock mails it to you in the in-game mail system. So make sure you save this for when you're level 72 on Mayhem 10 or 11. You can also technically get it from the Maurice Black Market vendor machine occasionally, but it rarely appears in there. In Borderlands 2, the Becca was actually one of the better all-around pearlescents, which sadly isn't saying much. However, even as good as it was still just slightly above average assault rifles in a game that was full of terrible assault rifles. What's worse is that to get it, you needed to be max level and kill tubby enemies and hope that they would drop it. And by that point in the game, most pearlescents do not feel like they do adequate damage. But in Borderlands 3, the Becca returns as a legendary, since Borderlands 3 sadly never brought back pearls, and the Becca just absolutely rocks in Borderlands 3. It's actually one of my all-around favorite weapons in 3, and earning it actually does feel rewarding, since you have to take down a plethora of hunt enemies for Hammerlock. Sadly, since it can't be farmed, you do need to make sure to wait for that max level, like I said earlier, to finish the Hammerlock hunts, and even then there is part variation, meaning you could end up with a technically bad version. However, even a quote-unquote bad version is still one of the best all-around assault rifles in the game.
And number 3!
At number 3, the Heartbreaker. Speaking of weapons that used to be a different rarity and are now legendary in Borderlands 3, the Heartbreaker is a shotgun that was a unique blue rarity weapon in Borderlands 2, obtainable by doing the Safe and Sound side quest for Moxie. In Borderlands 3, however, it returns as a legendary and drops from Georgia's Armada in the DLC Moxie's Heist of the Handsome Jackpot, which is the first DLC of the game. Not only is it now a higher rarity, but it's also dramatically improved. Anybody that saw my shotguns only flak playthrough probably noticed that I used it to defeat one of the hardest boss fights in the game, Hemovorus and Vermivorous. What makes this gun so good is that it does high damage and offers near Grog Nozzle level health regen, basically making you stupid strong and near invincible. In the hands of Flak or Moze, this gun will do crazy damage, and since Flak and Moze lack some of the ridiculous health steal mechanics of Zane and Amara, it will keep them alive.
Number 2!
At number 2 is the Butcher. Now, I was tempted to put this one at number 1 because, frankly, this gun is god tier in Borderlands 3, but it was also the best all-around pearlescent weapon in Borderlands 2, so I'm content to place this comfortably at the number 2 spot on the list. The Butcher in Borderlands 2 was capable of great damage while also regenerating ammo in the mag. Well, the Borderlands 3 version does that even better, does higher damage, and regens ammo even faster. This makes this an excellent weapon for any Vault Hunter in almost any situation. It had originally been the victim of some nerfs early on in Borderlands 3, but was brought back to life with some late in the game buffs that now have it as one of the best all-around weapons in the game. And getting this thing is crazy easy in Borderlands 3. All you need to do is go to Skywell 27, find Dinklebot located right here. He has a 100% drop chance on a Ludogram, which you then take to Crazy Earl on Sanctuary 3, turn that in, and you have a 25% chance to get the Butcher.
Honorable mention.
Honorable mentions go to the Lyuda, Slowhand, Hive, Shredifire, Storm, and Maggie. There's some other ones, but these are the most notable in my opinion.
And finally, here we are at number 1!
Finally, at number 1, the best returning weapon is hands down, in my opinion, the Skull Masher. And that's saying something because frankly, this gun has been amazing in every single Borderlands game. It was there in Borderlands 1, Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel, and now in Borderlands 3. Obtainable from Ice to the Invincible and DLC 2, Guns, Love, and Tentacles, the Skull Masher brings back that one-shot, one-kill headshot feel of its predecessors, but with the added awesomeness of being able to use it up close and personal like a shotgun. In the hands of a fadeaway crit flak build, this thing can be spammed into enemies up close to wipe them out in seconds. In the hands of a Ties That Bind Amara, you can phase grasp one enemy and with a single headshot clear the entire screen of red dots. In the hands of Zane, you can run and gun with this thing, hitting somebody from long range, then sliding and popping another enemy's head off from 2 feet away. And in the hands of Moze, using a Minesweeper class mod, this thing can trigger some crazy damage on even the toughest bosses. The Skull Masher is one of the greatest weapons in Borderlands history, and Borderlands 3 keeps its glory and honor alive. Hope you guys enjoyed this top 10 list. Let me know what returning weapons you guys like the most and least in the comment section down below. Hit that like button, hit subscribe for more Borderlands content. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.